Abilene Michaels, 34, stood frozen in her small apartment staring at her phone in disbelief. The text from her sister Victoria glared back at her. "The Christmas party is for successful people only. Someone who cleans toilets for a living would make everyone uncomfortable. Know your place, Abby." Tears welled in her eyes as 20 years of bottled resentment threatened to explode. Little did Victoria know, Abilene wasn't just a janitor, and this exclusion would be the last mistake her family would ever make against her. Before I dive into my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. If my family drama resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of real-life revenge stories. Trust me, you'll want to see how I turned my family's betrayal into the sweetest justice they never saw coming. Abilene hadn't always been at the bottom of her family's hierarchy. Growing up in the affluent neighborhood of Beacon Hill in Boston, the Michaels family had a reputation to maintain. Her father, Richard Michaels, was a prominent cardiothoracic surgeon at Massachusetts General Hospital, while her mother, Eleanor, came from old money and spent her days organizing charity galas and maintaining their social standing. Victoria, 2 years older than Abilene, had always been the golden child. With her perfect grades, classic beauty, and natural charm, she followed in their father's footsteps, graduating from Harvard Medical School with honors. Meanwhile, Abilene, though equally intelligent, had different interests. She loved art, literature, and helping others in more direct ways than through medical science or social climbing. The divide between the sisters grew when their parents clearly favored Victoria's practical career choices over Abilene's creative pursuits. "Art won't pay the bills, darling," her mother would say with thinly veiled disappointment. The Michaels name isn't associated with starving artists. Each comparison cut deeper than the last. When Abilene decided to major in English literature instead of pre-med, her parents threatened to cut off her college funding. Only her grandfather, William, who had built the family fortune through hard work rather than inheritance, stood by her. He secretly funded her education until his death during her junior year. After graduating, Abilene struggled to find stable work in publishing as she dreamed. The 2008 recession hit just as she entered the job market and opportunities dried up. Meanwhile, Victoria thrived, becoming the youngest attending physician in her hospital's history. The family celebrations for Victoria's successes were lavish, while Abilene's small achievements went unacknowledged. When Abilene eventually took a job as a night janitor at a large corporate building to pay her mounting student loans, her family's shame was palpable. They stopped inviting her to dinners when important connections would be present. Her mother began introducing her as our daughter who's finding herself rather than mentioning her actual job. The Christmas party that Victoria was now excluding her from wasn't just any gathering, it was the annual Michaels Family Christmas Gala, a tradition started by their grandfather. All extended family, close friends, and strategic business connections would be there. Being explicitly uninvited was the final confirmation that Abilene had been officially deemed unworthy of the Michaels name. What her family didn't know was that Abilene's janitorial position wasn't the dead-end job they assumed. For the past 3 years, she had been working nights at Stellaris Investments, one of the largest financial firms in Boston. While cleaning executive offices, Abilene had developed a keen understanding of investment strategies by reading documents left on desks and listening to late-night meetings. She had been quietly investing the small inheritance her grandfather had left her, growing it substantially through smart, calculated risks. Moreover, Abilene had been using her access to gather information. Not just any information, evidence of serious financial improprieties that involved not only Stellaris executives, but also her brother-in-law, James, Victoria's husband, and the CFO of a major healthcare corporation that did business with Stellaris. As Abilene sat in her modest apartment reading and rereading Victoria's cruel text, something hardened inside her. 3 years of careful planning had led to this moment. Her family had underestimated her for the last time. The exclusion from the Christmas party wasn't just an insult, it was the perfect opportunity for Abilene to set her plan in motion. She took a deep breath and opened her laptop. The folder labeled Family Trust contained everything she needed to reclaim her dignity and show her family exactly who they had been looking down on all these years. Abilene smiled to herself as she began typing an email to a contact at the Securities and Exchange Commission. The Stellaris investment building looked different in the daytime. Abilene rarely saw it bathed in sunlight, accustomed instead to the dim evening glow and security lights that accompanied her night shifts. Today, however, she walked through the revolving glass doors at 10 a.m., dressed not in her gray janitorial uniform, but in a tailored navy pantsuit that had cost her a month's salary. "Good morning, miss," Michael said, the receptionist, with a smile of recognition. "Mr. Harrington is expecting you." That was another thing her family didn't know. In the past year, Abilene had graduated from silent observer to valued consultant for Walter Harrington, the 8-year-old CEO of Stellaris. It had started 6 months ago when she had accidentally left a note correcting a mathematical error on a financial projection she'd seen while cleaning his office. Instead of firing her for reading confidential documents, Harrington had been intrigued. "You have quite an eye for patterns," Harrington had told her after calling her into his office the next evening. "Where did you learn financial analysis?" "I taught myself," Abilene had responded simply. "Numbers have always made sense to me." From that point, their unusual partnership began. Abilene continued working as a janitor, maintaining her cover, but also started providing Harrington with insights during private meetings. He valued her outsider perspective and razor-sharp analytical mind, especially her ability to spot ethical concerns that others missed or deliberately overlooked. What Harrington didn't know was that Abilene had been gathering evidence of insider trading within Stellaris, particularly involving her brother-in-law, James Carson. As Victoria's husband and the golden son-in-law of the Michaels family, James had always treated Abilene with the same condescension as the rest of her family. What they all failed to realize was that the just a janitor they mocked had unfettered access to offices, documents, and unguarded conversations that revealed just how James had achieved his meteoric rise in the healthcare industry. "You look thoughtful today," Abilene Walter commented, as she entered his spacious corner office with its panoramic view of the Boston skyline. "I take it this isn't just about the Morrison portfolio." "No," she replied, setting down her leather portfolio on his desk. "I've come to give my 2 weeks' notice, Walter." His bushy eyebrows shot up. "You're leaving us? Has another firm poached you?" "Because whatever they're offering..." "It's not that," Abilene interjected with a small smile. "It's time for me to step into the light. And I need a favor." For the next hour, Abilene outlined her plan. Walter listened intently, his expression shifting from surprise to understanding, and finally to something resembling pride. "You know, when I first discovered your notes on my paperwork, I thought I might have a corporate spy on my hands," he said when she finished. "Instead, I found something much rarer, a natural talent with integrity. Your family are fools for not seeing your worth." Abilene felt a surge of gratitude toward this man who had recognized her abilities when her own blood had dismissed her. "The Christmas gala is in 3 weeks," she said. "I need everything in place by then." Walter nodded, reaching for his phone. "I'll have legal draw up the paperwork immediately. And Abilene, I'd like to be there when you reveal everything. Your sister's face will be priceless." As Abilene left Stellaris that day, she felt lighter than she had in years. The plan she had meticulously crafted was finally in motion. Phase 1 was complete, securing Walter's backing and finalizing her transition from janitor to official financial consultant with a paper trail that would be indisputable. Phase 2 would begin tonight when she accessed James's office one last time. As the janitorial staff supervisor, she had the perfect excuse to be there alone and the perfect opportunity to copy the final documents she needed, the ones that would prove James had been leaking confidential patient data from his healthcare company to Stellaris traders in exchange for insider tips. Reaching her apartment, Abilene checked her phone. 3 missed calls from her mother and a text. Victoria tells me, "You're being difficult about the Christmas arrangements. Call me immediately." Abilene smiled and set her phone aside without responding. Let them think she was hurt and sulking. Let them underestimate her one final time. In 3 weeks, the Michaels family would never look at their janitor daughter the same way again. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Abilene continued her janitorial shifts, maintaining her cover while finalizing the documentation that would expose James's illegal activities. During the day, she worked with Walter and his legal team to establish her new consultant position and prepare for what would happen after the revelation. 10 days before the Christmas gala, Abilene received an unexpected call from her mother. "Abilene, darling, there's been a misunderstanding," Eleanor Michaels said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Of course you're invited to the Christmas gala. Victoria was just concerned that you might feel pays out of place among the guests." Abilene almost laughed at the transparent backpedaling. "What changed, Mother?" "Last week, I was an embarrassment to the family name." There was a slight pause. "Your father and I never said that. We're proud of you for doing what you need to do during these difficult economic times." The condescension was unmistakable. Abilene gripped her phone tighter. "And the real reason for this sudden inclusion." Another pause, longer this time. "The Harringtons will be attending this year. Walter specifically asked if you would be there. He seemed quite disappointed when Victoria mentioned you might not attend. So that was it." Walter had made his move casually, inquiring about her presence at a high society event where the Michaels would never expect him to know their janitor daughter. Her family was now scrambling to understand the connection and avoid any social faux pas with one of Boston's wealthiest businessmen. "I see," Abilene said coolly. "Well, since I'm no longer an embarrassment, I suppose I could attend." "Wonderful," her mother replied, relief evident in her voice. "We'll expect you at 7. And Abilene Doe wears something appropriate. I can send over my personal shopper if you need assistance." "That won't be necessary," Abilene said. "I think I can manage to dress myself." After hanging up, Abilene smiled to herself. The pieces were falling into place even more perfectly than she had planned. Now, instead of having to create a reason to attend the gala, her family was practically begging her to come. All because Walter Harrington, a man they desperately wanted to impress, had expressed interest in her presence. That evening at Stellaris, Abilene made her final move. Using her master key, she entered James's office and carefully photographed the documents she needed from a hidden folder he'd labeled Project Asclepius, named after the Greek god of medicine and healing, ironically enough. These files contained clear evidence of how James had been selling confidential patient treatment data to help Stellaris predict stock movements in pharmaceutical companies. As she was finishing, she heard the elevator ding on the otherwise empty executive floor. Quickly shutting down the computer and pocketing her phone, she grabbed her cleaning cart and began wiping down the desk, the picture of a diligent janitor working late. The office door opened and James himself walked in, stopping short when he saw her. "What are you doing in my office?" he demanded, his handsome face contorted with suspicion. Abilene gestured to her cleaning cart. "Just doing my job, James. Thursday nights I do the executive floor." He looked around, eyes narrowing. "Were you going through my things?" "Why would I do that?" Abilene asked innocently. "I'm just emptying trash and cleaning surfaces, same as always." James stared at her for a long moment. She could see the wheels turning in his mind, weighing whether his sister-in-law was capable of understanding the significance of anything in his office, ultimately dismissing the possibility. "Just hurry up and get out," he snapped. "And make sure you actually clean things properly this time. Last week I found coffee rings on my desk." "So sorry about that," Abilene said, forcing an apologetic smile. "I'll be more thorough." As she wheeled her cart out, she could feel James's eyes on her back. For a brief moment, she worried he might suspect something, but then she heard him mutter, "Useless," under his breath as he turned to his computer. The familiar sting of his contempt was now almost amusing. In just over a week, James would discover exactly how useless she was. The following day, Abilene visited an exclusive boutique in Newbury Street, one her mother frequently patronized. She spent a considerable sum on a designer gown that Eleanor Michaels would immediately recognize as being beyond a janitor's salary. It was deep emerald, elegant yet striking, and cost more than Abilene typically spent on 3 months of rent. But for the statement it would make at the gala, it was worth every penny. As the day of the Christmas gala approached, Abilene made her final preparations. She confirmed with Walter that all paperwork establishing her consulting role had been backdated appropriately and filed with the proper authorities. She ensured that her evidence against James was organized and verified, with copies safely stored in multiple locations. And she prepared herself mentally for the confrontation to come. The night before the gala, she received a text from Victoria. "Mother says you're coming tomorrow. Try not to mention your job to the Harringtons. If anyone asks, just say you're between opportunities." Abilene read the message twice and then typed a simple reply. "Don't worry, Victoria. Everyone at the party will know exactly what I do for a living by the end of the night." The Michaels family estate was transformed for the annual Christmas gala. Thousands of twinkling lights adorned the sprawling property, illuminating the fresh snowfall that had blanketed Boston earlier that day. Luxury vehicles lined the circular driveway, disgorging guests in designer attire and sparkling jewels. A 20-foot Christmas tree decorated with hand-blown glass ornaments and antique silver dominated the grand foyer. Abilene arrived fashionably late, stepping from the Uber she had deliberately taken rather than arranging for the family driver as her mother had suggested. She wanted full control of her arrival and departure. The moment she entered the foyer, conversations hushed. She cut an impressive figure in her emerald gown, her usually practical hair now styled in an elegant updo, accentuated by the diamond earrings her grandfather had given her for her 21st birthday jewelry. Her family had probably assumed she'd pawned years ago. Eleanor Michaels rushed forward, air-kissing both of Abilene's cheeks while whispering harshly, "You're late. The Harringtons have been asking about you." "Have they?" Abilene replied with a serene smile. "How flattering." Her father approached next, giving her an awkward side hug. "You look different tonight, Abby. Almost didn't recognize my own daughter." "Amazing what happens when I'm not in a janitorial uniform, isn't it, Dad?" she replied sweetly. Richard Michaels had the decency to look uncomfortable before being called away by another guest. Victoria and James stood by the grand staircase holding court among a circle of admirers. Victoria's eyes widened when she spotted Abilene taking in the designer gown with obvious confusion. She whispered something to James, who glanced over with a frown. Abilene circulated through the party, accepting a glass of champagne and making small talk with family friends who seemed uncertain how to interact with the Michaels' black sheep daughter. She spotted Walter Harrington by the fireplace and made her way toward him. "Miss Michaels," Walter said loudly, as she approached using a formal tone they never employed in private. "How delightful to see you this evening." Heads turned at his obvious pleasure in greeting her. Victoria and James drifted closer, clearly interested in understanding the connection between Boston's financial titan and their janitorial relative. "Mr. Harrington," Abilene replied with equal formality. Thank you again for the opportunity. It's been a privilege working with you. Victoria inserted herself into the conversation. You two know each other, from where Walter smiled broadly. Your sister has been an invaluable asset to Stellaris Investments for quite some time now. In fact, I don't know what we'd do without her analytical mind. Victoria's perfect smile faltered. I didn't realize janitorial staff interacted with the CEO. The moment had arrived sooner than Abilene had planned, but she seized it nonetheless. Oh, I don't think I've been clear about my role, have I? While I did begin at Stellaris in the janitorial department for the past year, I've been serving as a financial consultant to Mr. Harrington directly. The silence that followed was delicious. Victoria's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. James's face had drained of color. In fact, Walter continued smoothly. Abilene has just accepted a formal position as our new Director of Ethical Investment Strategies, a division we're creating specifically around her expertise. Eleanor Michaels, who had materialized at Victoria's side, forced a brittle laugh. Well, isn't that surprising? Abilene, you never mentioned? You never asked, Mother Abilene interrupted gently. In fact, the only questions about my work have been when I might find something more suitable for someone with the Michaels name. The growing tension was interrupted by the arrival of two unfamiliar men in dark suits who entered the foyer and scanned the crowd. Their eyes locked on James and they moved purposefully toward him. James Carson, one of them asked, though it clearly wasn't a question. Yes, James replied, instinctively straightening his tie. I'm Agent Donovan with the FBI, and this is Agent Reynolds. We need to speak with you regarding allegations of securities fraud and HIPAA violations. Gasps erupted around them. Victoria grabbed James's arm. There must be some mistake, she insisted. No mistake, Mrs. Carson, Agent Reynolds said firmly. We have substantial evidence of your husband's involvement in selling confidential patient information to traders at Stellaris Investments. All eyes in the vicinity turned to Walter Harrington, who shook his head solemnly. Stellaris has been cooperating with the investigation, he announced. We discovered the illegal activity through our internal ethics review process and reported it immediately. Abilene watched as James's face contorted with rage and panic. His eyes darted around the room before landing on her with sudden realization. You, he snarled. You did this. Actually, James, Abilene replied calmly, you did this to yourself. I just made sure you couldn't keep hiding it. As the FBI agents led a protesting James toward the door, the other guests broke into shocked murmurs. Victoria lunged at Abilene, her perfect composure shattered. You vindictive bitch, you've ruined everything. Walter stepped between them. I wouldn't create a scene, Dr. Michaels. The evidence against your husband is irrefutable, and I have reason to believe the authorities may have questions for you as well regarding how much you knew about your husband's activities. Victoria recoiled as if slapped. Eleanor Michaels swayed slightly, reaching for Richard's arm to steady herself. Abilene surveyed the family that had belittled her for years, now standing in shocked disarray in the middle of their perfect Christmas gala. The revenge she had meticulously planned had unfolded even better than she had anticipated. If you'll excuse me, she said, setting down her champagne glass, I believe I've had enough family time for one evening. As Abilene turned to leave, she caught sight of several guests watching the drama with fascination. The Michaels family's carefully constructed image was crumbling before Boston's elite. It was a destruction of their own making, the direct result of the arrogance that had led them to underestimate the daughter they had deemed unworthy. Wait, did you feel that twist coming? If you're enjoying this family drama roller coaster, take a quick second to hit that like button and subscribe. I'd love to know what you think. Victoria will do next. Drop your predictions in the comments below. Now let's see what happens when the family's perfect facade finally crumbles. The days following the Christmas gala explosion were a whirlwind of consequences. James was released on bail but faced serious federal charges that could result in decades of imprisonment. Victoria, while not criminally charged, was placed on administrative leave from the hospital pending an investigation into whether she had known about or benefited from her husband's illegal activities. The Michaels family name, once synonymous with Boston excellence, was now fodder for gossip columns and cautionary tales in medical ethics classes. Richard and Eleanor retreated to their summer home in Martha's Vineyard, avoiding the press and former friends alike. Abilene, meanwhile, stepped fully into her new role at Stellaris. Walter had been true to his word, establishing her as the head of a new division focused on ethical investment practices. Her salary was now 6 figures. Her office had a view of the harbor, and she had a team of analysts reporting directly to her. 3 weeks after the gala, Abilene received a call from her mother. Abilene Eleanor's voice was subdued, lacking its usual imperious tone. "We need to talk." "About what, mother?" "About what you've done to this family," Eleanor replied, a hint of the old sharpness returning. "Your father can barely show his face at the hospital. Victoria might lose her medical license. Was your revenge worth destroying everything our family has built?" Abilene took a deep breath, tamping down the anger that threatened to bubble up. "I didn't destroy anything, Mother. James committed federal crimes. Victoria chose to marry and support a criminal. You and Dad chose to value status over integrity. I simply stopped protecting people who never protected me." "We're your family," Eleanor insisted. "No," Abilene replied firmly. "You're people who share my DNA. There's a difference." The line went quiet for so long that Abilene wondered if her mother had hung up. "Your grandfather would be ashamed of what you've done," Eleanor finally said, her voice trembling. Abilene smiled sadly, though her mother couldn't see it. "Actually, Grandfather William left me a letter before he died. He said the Michaels' fortune was built on seeing value where others didn't, on working hard when others cut corners. He said I reminded him of himself when he was young, before the family name became more important than the family values." Another long silence. "We're having a family meeting on Sunday," Eleanor said eventually. "Your father and I would like you to attend." Abilene considered this. "Is Victoria coming?" "Yes. She's struggling right now. James's legal fees are mounting, and with her career in jeopardy, of course, they needed money." Abilene's newfound financial success made her useful to the family for the first time. "I'll be there," she said. "But Mother, don't mistake my attendance for forgiveness." Sunday arrived cold and gray. The Michaels family home, usually immaculate, showed subtle signs of distress. Mail was piled on the entrance table. The flowers in the foyer were wilting. The staff had been reduced, a cost-cutting measure, Abilene presumed. Victoria sat in the living room, a shadow of her former polished self. Dark circles underlined her eyes, and her designer outfit had been replaced by simple jeans and a sweater. She didn't look up when Abilene entered. Richard sat beside his elder daughter, absently patting her hand in a rare display of physical affection. Eleanor perched on the edge of an armchair, back straight as ever despite the circumstances. "Thank you for coming," Richard began awkwardly. "We've been reevaluating some things as a family." Abilene took a seat across from them. "I'm listening." Eleanor cleared her throat. "The family trust is under scrutiny because of James's legal troubles. Assets have been frozen pending investigation. Victoria's salary is suspended, and your father's practice is suffering from the negative publicity. You need money," Abilene stated flatly. Victoria finally looked up, eyes flashing with remnants of her old pride. "Don't act so superior. You've been planning this revenge for years, haven't you? Working as a janitor just to spy on James, I took the janitorial job because I needed work, Victoria. I discovered James's illegal activities by accident. What I chose to do with that information, however, was deliberate." "You could have come to us," Richard said. given us a chance to handle it privately. Abilene laughed without humor. The way you handled my career choices, or the way you handled excluding me from family events, or perhaps you mean the way you handled treating me like I was worthless because I cleaned floors for a living. No one had a response to that. I didn't come here to argue, Abilene continued. What exactly do you want from me, Eleanor? Straighten further if that was possible. We'd like to propose a family reconciliation in return for the financial assistance during this difficult time. We would welcome you back fully into the family fold. The nakedness of the proposal was almost admirable in its audacity. They weren't even attempting to disguise their motives. Let me be clear, Abilene said slowly. You want me to use my new position and salary to bail out the family that spent years telling me I was a disappointment. We're still your family, Abby Richards said quietly. Despite everything, Abilene studied them, her proud mother diminished but unbowed, her father finally showing cracks in his patriarchal certainty, and Victoria humbled but still harboring resentment behind her eyes. Here's my counter-offer, Abilene said after a moment. I will help Victoria with living expenses, not James's legal fees. On one condition, she volunteers at the free medical clinic in Dorchester for a year. No prestigious hospital, no wealthy patients. Just people who need help and can't afford to pay for it. Victoria's head snapped up. That's ridiculous. I'm a specialized surgeon, not a general practitioner. Then you can develop new skills, Abilene replied calmly. People do that when necessity demands it. She turned to her parents. As for you two, I'll contribute to maintaining this house and your basic expenses, provided you establish a scholarship fund in Grandfather William's name. It should support students from working-class backgrounds who want to enter medicine but can't afford the education. I'll match whatever you contribute. Eleanor's face flushed with indignation. You're in no position to dictate terms to us, Abilene. We are still your parents. And I'm still the daughter you excluded from Christmas, because I was just a janitor, Abilene countered. Now I'm the daughter with financial stability while you're facing ruin. Funny how life works out, isn't it? She stood smoothing her skirt. Those are my terms. Take them or leave them. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Victoria spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Why are you even offering to help at all? You've won. You've destroyed everything. Why not just walk away and leave us to suffer? Abilene looked at her, sister really looked at her, and saw not the golden child who had tormented her, but a frightened woman facing consequences for the first time in her life. Because destroying you was never my goal, Victoria. I just wanted you to see me, to acknowledge that my worth isn't determined by my job title or my bank balance or the people I impress at parties. I wanted justice, not annihilation. She moved toward the door, then paused. Call me when you've made your decision. Unlike some members of this family, I don't exclude people just because they're going through difficult times. With that parting shot, Abilene left the house where she had grown up, walked past the garden where she and Victoria had once played as children, and got into her car. As she drove away, she felt neither the vindictive satisfaction she had expected nor the guilt her mother had tried to instill. Instead, she felt something she hadn't experienced in relation to her family for a very long time: peace. 3 months passed. Winter released its grip on Boston, giving way to a tentative spring. Abilene thrived in her new position, implementing ethics policies that were being adopted across Stellaris and garnering attention throughout the financial industry. Walter had become not just a mentor, but a friend, introducing her to his social circle, where she was valued for her intelligence and integrity, rather than her family name. Victoria had eventually accepted Abilene's terms, though not without resistance. She now worked 3 days a week at the Dorchester clinic, her luxury car looking out of place in the neighborhood. Initially, she had approached the work with barely concealed disdain, but something had shifted in recent weeks. During their monthly check-in dinners, awkward affairs that Abilene insisted upon, Victoria had started talking about her patients with growing engagement. There's this single mother with 3 kids Victoria had shared during their last dinner. She works 2 jobs and still makes time to bring her children for regular checkups. I've never seen that kind of dedication in my regular practice. Abilene had nodded, recognizing the first cracks in her sister's elitist worldview. Richard and Eleanor had also reluctantly established the William Michael Scholarship Fund. Abilene suspected they'd done so primarily to maintain appearances and access to her financial support, but the impact was the same regardless of their motivation. 5 students would receive full rides to medical school next fall. James's case was progressing through the legal system. He had attempted to implicate others at Stellaris to reduce his own sentence, but Walter's preemptive cooperation with authorities had neutralized that strategy. Victoria visited him weekly at his lawyer's office, though the strain was evident in her increasingly subdued demeanor. On a mild April afternoon, Abilene received an unexpected visitor at her office. Her assistant buzzed through sounding perplexed. "Miss Michaels, there's a Dr. Victoria Carson here to see you." "No appointment." Abilene raised an eyebrow. Victoria had never visited her at work. "Send her in." Victoria entered looking both out of place and oddly vulnerable in the corporate setting. She wore a simple blouse and trousers rather than her usual designer attire and carried a manila envelope. "This is quite a surprise," Abilene said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. Victoria sat, placing the envelope between them. "I won't take much of your time. I know you're busy with important work." The absence of sarcasm in that statement was notable. "What's this?" Abilene asked, indicating the envelope. "Divorce papers," Victoria replied flatly. "I'm leaving James." Abilene sat back, genuinely surprised. "I thought you were standing by him through the trial." "I was. I am, in some ways." Victoria pushed her hair back, a nervous gesture Abilene remembered from childhood. "But I've realized some things these past months. Working at the clinic, seeing how people with so little show so much character. It's made me question what I've valued in my life, including my marriage." "Victoria, let me finish," her sister interrupted. "James didn't just commit crimes, Abby. He betrayed patient trust. As a doctor, that's unforgivable. And when I confronted him, do you know what he said? He said everyone does it, that the rules are for people without connections." He sounded exactly like Mother. Abilene remained silent, allowing her sister this moment of painful clarity. "I've been thinking about what you said at the house that day," Victoria continued. "About your worth not being determined by your job or bank balance. I've been defining myself by those things my entire life. And when I look at what that's gotten me, a criminal husband, a tarnished reputation, family relationships based on status rather than love, I can't help but think you've been right all along." It was perhaps the first time Victoria had ever admitted Abilene was right about anything. The acknowledgement hung in the air between them. "What will you do now?" Abilene asked, finally. Victoria took a deep breath. "I've applied for a permanent position at the clinic. The pay is a fraction of what I made at the hospital, but the work matters in a way I never understood before." She reached across the desk, hesitantly touching Abilene's hand. "I owe you an apology. Many apologies, actually, for years of treating you like you were beneath me." Abilene looked at her sister's hand on hers, the same hand that had typed that cruel Christmas party text months ago. She should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt an unexpected surge of compassion. "We both made choices based on what we valued," Abilene said softly. "I just wanted you to see that your values were hurting people, including yourself." Victoria nodded, withdrawing her hand and standing up. "I should go. I have patients waiting." She paused at the door. "I don't expect us to suddenly become best friends, Abby. Too much has happened, but I hope maybe we could try being sisters again. Real ones this time." After Victoria left, Abilene sat at her window watching the spring rain begin to fall over Boston. The revenge she had so carefully orchestrated had worked exactly as planned, yet the outcome was nothing like she had imagined. Instead of satisfaction in her family's downfall, she found herself hoping for their redemption. Not for her sake, but for theirs. That evening, Abilene received a text from her father. "Your mother and I have been talking. We'd like to have dinner next week. Just the four of us. No agenda, no asking for anything, just family." As she typed her reply, a simple yes, Abilene realized that the true power had never been in the revenge itself, but in the choice that came after the choice to help rebuild what had been broken, but on better foundations this time. 1 year later, Abilene stood in the kitchen of her new brownstone in Beacon Hill, arranging appetizers on a serving tray. Through the window, she could see snow beginning to fall, the first of the season. Christmas was approaching again, but everything felt different this time. The doorbell rang and Abilene smoothed her sweater before answering. Victoria stood on the doorstep, holding a bottle of wine and a bakery box. "I brought dessert," she said with a tentative smile. "And that Cabernet you liked from dinner last month." "Perfect timing," Abilene replied, stepping aside to let her sister in. "Mom and Dad just texted that they're running late. Dad had a meeting with the scholarship committee. The William Michaels Scholarship Fund had expanded, now supporting 10 medical students from underprivileged backgrounds. Richard had become unexpectedly passionate about the project, mentoring several of the students personally. Victoria hung her coat in the closet, a familiar gesture that would have been unimaginable a year ago. "How's Walter doing with the retirement planning?" she asked, following Abilene to the kitchen. Still struggling with the idea, Abilene chuckled. "But he's agreed to step down as CEO next spring. I'll be taking over as interim while the board selects a permanent replacement." "They'd be fools not to choose you," Victoria said with surprising sincerity. Their relationship had evolved slowly over the past year. The monthly dinners had gradually become weekly, then expanded to include occasional weekend outings. They would never have the carefree sisterhood of childhood friends, but they had found something perhaps more valuable, a relationship based on mutual respect and genuine understanding. James had eventually pleaded guilty to reduced charges and was serving a 5-year sentence. Victoria's divorce had been finalized 6 months ago, and she had legally resumed using the Michaels name. She had been officially hired as the medical director of the Dorchester Clinic, implementing programs that had improved care for thousands of low-income patients. Eleanor Michaels had perhaps changed the least, still concerned with appearances and social standing. But even she had softened somewhat, finding a new social circle among philanthropists rather than social climbers. She had stopped referring to Abilene's career choices as unexpected and had even on one memorable occasion expressed pride in her younger daughter's achievements. When Richard and Eleanor arrived for dinner, the four Michaels sat around Abilene's dining table, the antique mahogany piece that had once graced their family home, gifted to Abilene when her parents downsized to a smaller property after selling the mansion. "I'd like to propose a toast," Richard said, raising his wine glass. "To family, not the one defined by expectations and appearances, but the one we're building now. It took us too long to understand what matters, but I'm grateful we got a second chance to get it right." As they clinked glasses, Abilene caught Victoria's eye across the table. Her sister gave her a small, knowing smile, an acknowledgement of how far they'd come and how much they'd both changed. Later, as they finished dessert, Eleanor surprised everyone by saying, "I've been thinking about hosting a small Christmas gathering this year. Nothing like the old galas, just family and a few close friends. Abilene, would you help me plan it? You always had a better eye for what's genuine rather than just impressive." Abilene smiled, recognizing both the olive branch and the subtle admission in her mother's request. "I'd be happy to, Mom." As the evening wound down and her family prepared to leave, Abilene found herself alone in the kitchen with Victoria. Do you ever regret it? Victoria asked quietly. Exposing James changing everything, Abilene considered the question. I regret that it had to happen that way, she answered honestly. But I don't regret where we've ended up. Victoria nodded, understanding. Me neither, strangely enough. I'm happier now than I ever was when everything looked perfect from the outside. After everyone had gone, Abilene stood at her window watching the snow transform the city into something clean and new. The revenge she had planned had accomplished its purpose, but not in the way she'd expected. Instead of destroying her family, it had forced them to rebuild, to see each other clearly for perhaps the first time, and to choose what kind of family they wanted to be. The lesson Abilene realized wasn't about revenge at all. It was about understanding that true worth comes not from status or appearance, but from integrity, compassion, and the courage to stand firm in your value, even when those who should value you most fail to do so. What did you think of my family's journey? I'd love to hear if you've ever experienced similar family dynamics, or if you've had your own moments of standing up for your worth. Drop a comment below, sharing your thoughts. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life drama and lessons learned. Don't forget to share with someone who might need to hear this message about standing in their value. Thank you for being here. Sometimes the family we choose, like this community, understands us better than the one we're born into. Until next time.